Good morning, guys. Hey, Monday, November 16th. You are seeing this correctly. We are going through science. Now, we're going to get back to our regions and states and capitals after Christmas. But between now and Christmas, we're going to talk about science. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about life science. Now, it's not that we haven't been talking about life science. We talked about animals and plants and vertebrates and invertebrates and things like that. But more specifically, life science being our life, especially our bodies and how they work and how God created them. It is amazing when we go through our body to see just how it is and how all these different parts work together. And when we go through science, it's hard not to praise God and say, God, you're amazing how you made everything. But the first kind of bodily system I want to go through is something called our skeletal system. And by the way, as you saw on this slide here, page 143 to 145, that's really going to help out. And when we talk about our skeletal system, you might know some of our bones in our skeleton, our skull, right? Don't hit it too hard. We have our jawbone, we have our elbow you can feel. We have different bones that we can actually feel, and including some bones that we can see, right? Your teeth. Your teeth are some of your bones. What's the purpose? What's the purpose of bones? Well, one of the purposes is for protection. And here's what I mean by that. If you're ever King Kong and you start doing this like King Kong does, well, underneath here you can kind of feel these ribs on, and those are bones, and they might even sometimes call it your rib cage. And what is that for? Well, for protection. We have this strong bone right here. It's called your sternum. And you probably know what's all underneath your sternum and rib cage. Well, that's your lungs and your heart. And those are some very incredibly important things, right? We also have your skull here that protects your brain, right? A lot of it actually protects. A lot of it's stability. If you would not have your skeletal system or your bones, you'd literally be a heap. And we'd just be a heap of skin and organs and hair just lying on the floor. We wouldn't be able to move. We wouldn't be stable. This is what helped us able to stand up and things like that. And also movement. Later on this week, we're going to be talking about our muscular system, and you almost have to talk about your skeletal and your muscular system together because they work together so much. You have a lot of different muscles that are attached to your bones, and that's actually how you move, is your muscles through tendons that are attached to your bones, really tied to your bones. And when you contract your muscle, your bone moves. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the week. But they also help in other ways, maybe some things you haven't heard as much. Your bones store calcium. If you hear mommy or auntie or somebody say, hey, drink milk because it helps your bones, it's true. Calcium is found a lot in milk. It's rich in calcium, I should say. And calcium is something that your bones need to remain strong. If you have very brittle bones or very weak bones that break easily, probably because you don't have a lot of calcium in your body. And you need to replenish that with different things, especially milk. Your bones also produce different kinds of blood cells that carry oxygen to your body and also help fight disease. Next week, we're going to have a quick little lesson on the circulatory system, which is basically the blood in your body. It's amazing everything that's actually in your blood. It's not just red stuff. There's all kinds of things in there, but your bones play a big part in that too. When we go through all these different systems, it's amazing to see how God has all these systems in our body working together. We already talked about our skeletal and our muscular system, how they work together. But there again, we have our skeletal system working with our circulatory system. Basically, our bones working with our bloodstream. Here's what you might see in page 145. That's a blurry picture, and you might say, I know Halloween is over. But we're going to learn about these bones. And again, here you can kind of see the outline of the human body. Most of your bones are kind of inside, so to speak. Some of them you can feel, like your hands and your feet and your knees and your rib cage and things like that. But the only ones you can see again are your teeth, which is part of your skeletal system. But we actually have different kinds of shapes of bones, and all serve a very good purpose. One, we have different things like a flat bone. That's like in our skull, and it's amazing to know our skull is made up of a bunch of different pieces that actually get older, actually fuse together and actually harden. That's why, especially if there's a newborn baby, you gotta be really, really careful of their head, because their skull is not together. All those flat bones that make up the skull are still hardening and coming together. We also have different things like the long bone. This bone inside your upper arm is called your humerus. It sounds very funny, but it's actually called your humerus, and that's just kind of a long bone that gives stability to your arm, right? We also have short bones. If you can feel right here in your hand or in your upper foot with your ankle, I don't want to show you my feet because they're icky, but you can feel all these different bones in here. There's actually quite a lot of bones inside your hand and inside your ankle. We just kind of call those short bones. And then there's irregular bones. You might remember from English we have irregular verbs, right? Verbs that don't follow a rule. They're just kind of different. Well, most bones can be categorized as flat bone, a long bone, or a short bone. But we have some that are irregular. And there's a very specific reason God made these. I mean, your hip bones are the only ones that kind of stick out like that, your hip. And then especially your vertebrae, if you can feel in back. Remember we talked about vertebrae? Those are animals with a backbone, just like us. If you can feel way back there, you can kind of feel part of it sticking out. Well, that's part of your vertebrae that you can actually see at times. But those are kind of irregularly shaped. There's no one shaped like that. And here, I kind of like this with the color coding because it shows all the flat bones, irregular bones, long bones, short bones, and things like that. Now, you might have heard of different things like joints. This is a picture of a knee joint. And I'm going to show another picture of an elbow joint soon. But the point of joints is where two or more bones meet together. That's a joint. Sometimes we call it like a door joint, but it basically means it can go open to close only so far. Well, you guys know with your knee, you can bend your knee a lot at the point where it's joined or where the joint is. You also know that it can't go the other way. That's an injury that really hurts. It's called a hyperextension if your knee bends the wrong way. Very painful injury, but God made it so it can only bend so much, and it can really bend a lot this way, but then when it goes flat, it can't go more. Your fingers are the same way, right? If you heard of somebody called double jointed, that kind of means they can move it a lot more flexibly, I should say, because their joints are a lot more. Now, when you move your fingers, you can go like this all you want easily. But when you put them straight, they really can't go too far. If it would bend this way, if your fingers would bend that way, that's again a really painful injury that your fingers are meant to, because the joints here, you have part of your bone here and part of your bone here, and in the middle, what we might call the knuckles, that's your finger joints. Another famous one is your elbow. There again, you can see here where it's joined. We have the humerus here, and there's two bones here. It's called your radius and ulna, which you can see here, and they meet right here at the elbow, right? And so I can bend it this way, and when it's straight, if it would go more that way, that's a really painful injury. Again, I hope never happens to you, called the hyperextension, but that's simply what it means by a joint, where two or more bones meet together. Now more about the skeletal system. We kind of, scientists really break it up into two parts. We have the axial part and the appendicular part. Really what that means, kind of to break it up loosely, the axial is some of the bones that are incredibly important. And I don't mean that we like them more or anything like that, but those are the main protective bones. Just like we talked about earlier, you can understand that these bones are protecting some very vital organs. The vertebrae protect the spinal cord, right, which helps us move all over. right? And then the rib cage protects the lungs and the heart, and the skull protects the brain. All incredibly vital bones that really do a lot of protecting. And then the appendicular part is kind of, again, we don't have bones on the outside except for our teeth, but kind of more the outer bones that are really meant a lot for stability and movement and things like that. So there's a skeletal system, there's that guy, and we have all these different bones, and some of them okay, these are our finger bones, and these are our collarbone right here where our collar kind of sits, but using the more scientific terms, you might see that, our finger bones are really called metacarpals and carpals in here. Metacarpals and carpals in here, right? And our collarbone is actually scientifically called the clavicle. And our knee bone is actually called the patella, right? Might not be as easy as the hip bone is connected to the leg bone. There's more scientific names to it, and that's what we're going to focus on the next couple days, right? We have the hips here, or what a lot of people will call the pelvis. Those are the big bones. In fact, the strongest bones in your body, and that's connected to the femur, which is the upper leg bone, and so on and so forth. But at any rate, here's what I want you to do. Really just kind of get introduced to some bones. Here we have just 5 bones I want us to learn here. We're going to learn a lot more tomorrow, but 5 bones. And I want you to label them on this sheet. I know it's kind of blurry here or light, but on your paper pack I think it shows up well. Label them there, and then if you need to answer these questions, hey, go back and rewind this video here, or pause the video where it's at, what 3 jobs do skeletons do in their body? That's one of the first couple slides that we talked about there. What important organ inside the body does the skull protect? What important organ do the ribs protect? And the kneecap bone is found where the bones of the lower leg and upper leg meet. What's a special name for when bones meet? Remember when we were doing that? So those are your questions when we introduce this skeletal system. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow, and then Wednesday and Thursday we're going to talk about the muscular system. Hey guys, Lord's blessings to you today. He's a praise the Savior.